Well, thank you for having me as a representative of NUT here today. Actually, in your program, it said that Michiel Stapper was going to be here. As you can see, I'm not Michiel. But just like Michiel, I'm also a former chair of the ASFA Student Union and involved in the foundation of a new political party here in Amsterdam, which is called NUT, Nieuwe Amsterdamse Toekomst, which stands for New Amsterdam Future in English. And today I just shortly want to talk to you about this new initiative. I think it really already fits a lot with what you have been saying as well, obviously on a completely different level because this is not international. We're talking about Amsterdam, but in a way it's very similar because it is also about giving a voice to youth and doing that maybe in a more direct way. But first, before I go into the political party and what we stand for and why we founded this, I want to go back to what you said in the introduction as well about activism, because I think that when we talk about generation, and obviously that's already sometimes quite problematic because we don't even know where a generation usually ends and starts, let alone how we define it. But still, if we talk about our generation, then usually people, when we talk about activism, say that we are not that activist. And that we compare it to, for example, the 70s, where there were a lot more demonstrations, and when people actually went a lot on the street to demonstrate for certain rights and privileges, we don't do that anymore, and so maybe we don't care. This is something that we actually quite often hear. But maybe a little bit too close to that. I think that there is a really big difference between there are many differences obviously, but a big difference between our generation and the generation that demonstrated a lot in the 1970s is that the problems that we are dealing with today are so different. The things that people demonstrated against in the 1970s were, for example, the legalization of gay marriage, or the legalization of drugs or abortions, or maybe the representation of students in student council in universities or in universities of applied sciences. But these are all quite individual rights, and these are things that are about people, and they can understand what the influence of gaining these certain rights are on people. But the problems that we are dealing with today are far broader and maybe also a little bit vaguer, and it is harder to understand what the impact of these problems are on us. So if we're talking about sustainable development, or if we're talking about environmental issues, but also privacy or poverty, these are things that are usually not really necessarily tackled towards us, or they don't really impact us directly, individually. And these are the kind of problems that we're dealing with, and it is harder to mobilize and to activate people around these kind of broad rights. Does that mean that we don't care because we don't go on the streets for this? I don't think so. And I think that especially when we look around in Amsterdam, but in the Netherlands in general, we see that there are a lot of young people that have new initiatives and new ideas to tackle these kinds of problems. We don't go on the streets maybe that often. Maybe we don't go, protest at the Malieveld, or we don't occupy the Maagdenhuis. But there are different ways now to tackle the problems that we're dealing with these days. And that is also the reason why, or one of the reasons why we started this new political initiative, because we feel that Amsterdam especially should be a city that gives the opportunity to young people to explore these new ways of activism and to start up new little businesses to really tackle the problems that we are dealing with today in a different way than we did maybe 30 years ago. But we also see that in Amsterdam there are a lot of rules and a lot of rules and regulations that make it harder for young people to do this. And that is one of the things that, as a new political party, we want to tackle these kinds of problems. So there are many startups, and I know that everyone here knows a lot of people around them that have started up new organizations or new businesses or new projects to tackle certain problems, and that can go from sustainable clothing to more just like what we just heard, for example. So there are many different ways, and we feel that there should be less regulations around these kinds of startups and new projects for young people so that they can really experiment with these new ways. So this is why we started up the new political party. We launched in the 9th of September, so it's all very new and very exciting, and we're just in the middle of writing our program and looking at all the points that we find important. There are basically 4 issues or 4 themes that we're working around. And obviously there are many other themes that are also important for youth and also in general important for Amsterdam. But we feel that there are these 4 themes that are really important for young people and that are the necessary things that we need to get done in Amsterdam to make sure that young people are still attracted to this city. They have the opportunity to really do new things and experiment with new things. So the first thing is housing. Obviously Amsterdam is pretty locked up when we talk about housing. The waiting lists for students and for young people to get a good room that it doesn't cost 600 euros a month, they're incredibly high. And I think it is really a problem because we want Amsterdam to be a living city and we want Amsterdam to be a young city and we want Amsterdam to attract young people. But at the same time, there's no housing and there's going to be a lot of people that can't come to Amsterdam because of this problem. So that's the first thing that we want to tackle, and we really think that the municipality doesn't do enough yet when we talk about student housing, and that it is necessary to have the voice of youth in that topic and to really talk about how we can tackle the problem of housing. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and I already talked about that a little bit, we want to look at unemployment and employment and also making entrepreneurship easier. Obviously, youth unemployment right now is really, really high, and that's a big problem. So that is one of the things that we think should be a lot more attention for. But then also, as I already said, there should be less regulations for example, starting up a new company or a new project. One way that we want to do that is to create regulation-free zones. I couldn't really find a better translation for that in English. But what I mean with that is that in Amsterdam we have over 1 million square meters of office space that is not used at all. And we think that these empty spaces should be used for young people to have regulation-free zones. So zones where you don't necessarily have to ask for licenses if you want to start up something or if you want to experiment with new ideas. These office spaces could be used in a lot better ways than it is now, because now it's not used at all. And we think that it should be possible to have a couple of these big office spaces for young people to experiment and to start up new things and to see how that works. So that is also something that we have in our program that we really want to strive for. And then also, for example, we want to create a digital space from the municipality that it makes it easier to actually ask for these licenses and to apply for these licenses, and that it doesn't take ages to even start up something or a new idea. And then obviously education is something that is important. We're going to talk about that, I think, today a lot as well. I saw in the program many people that are talking about education. Education is also something that we think in Amsterdam we can do better. One of the things that we would like to initiate is to start up associate degrees. These are degrees for people that start at the MBO level. I wouldn't really know how to translate that. And then they want to go to the University of Applied Sciences to have a sort of a 2-year program for these people to do. And then also we think that there should be an alderman for higher education in Amsterdam. We don't have anyone specifically only looking at the topic of higher education at the municipality right now. So we think that is also important. And then lastly, we want to create an Amsterdam that is more living and more flexible than it is maybe now. We want to make sure that Amsterdam doesn't turn into some sort of a museum where it is impossible to really try out new things, to start up new bars, or where it's not allowed to be drunk in bars anymore, which was one of the things that we also actively striving against, because one of the parties in Amsterdam had that idea. And also, for example, the public transport is a topic that we're really looking into, because we think that it is kind of ridiculous that we're living in the capital of the Netherlands and you still can't go at night back by metro or by tram. So these are kind of the topics that we really want to look into. And that is we want to do that by being an Amsterdam party, so a party that is only in Amsterdam. We're not bound by national rules, we're not bound by national political ideas or programs, and that means that we can really look into what is happening in Amsterdam. And then on the other hand, we also really want to give other people, younger people, a voice in the municipality and also in our party, which means that basically anyone can contribute, anyone who wants to or who feels like they want to raise a point or talk to us about what should be in our program and what should be in the municipality more. We really invite everyone to give these kinds of comments and to think with us. So that is basically the thing that we're trying to set up now, and we're going to participate in the elections in 2014, in the spring of 2014. So it's very exciting. So yeah, also obviously I invite you all to participate or to contribute if you feel like you have anything that should be taken into account when we represent young people in the municipality of Amsterdam. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again for stepping in. So last minute, we had a very last minute dropout from the field. But thanks, you came, and I think you're an awesome alternative, I would say. That means, of course, that we have a solidly female opening. I don't mind. Sorry, that was not the intention, but that's how it ended up. They're also active guys. Okay, I start with a question, then you can step in. I think you're already, I guess, in contact also with already existing parties. How do they see a party only consisting of young people? Because that's quite new, I guess. Do they take you serious?
Well, I mean, we just started, so it's still, in the beginning phase. So I wouldn't know if they really take it serious yet. But obviously the reactions are mixed, and a lot of people say, and it's a valid point that we already have the younger chapters of political organizations. Why don't you do it through that way? And our answer to that is because we think that right now the issues that we're facing when it comes to youth are so important that we should have a separate party that just focus on youth. And then secondly, these kinds of parties, the way they exist, still means that young people often don't actually end up in the municipality and speaking about issues that are about them. So this is exactly also what you were saying. Even though they have a voice in the program, younger people, and I think that's also really valuable, I think that it is also a good thing if there would be a direct voice from the youth in the municipality. So we'll see how other parties will react to this.
When I listened to the issues that you wanted to tackle as a youth party, I heard certain issues that have a very strong, let's say, right of the spectrum sort of color, and some that have a very strong left of the spectrum color. So if with these issues you attract youth from different parties, how do you combine these different political viewpoints in one party?
Yeah, it's true. I think it's because it is also a party that is only in Amsterdam. I think that means that it's a very different political color than we are maybe used to. And I don't know, I think that the way that we're doing it now is really just to invite a lot of young people from all different backgrounds, all different education levels, all different neighborhoods in Amsterdam to talk about the things that they find important. And I think that that is the starting point for us, and not a certain political color that we have from the beginning onwards. And I think that actually makes it really strong. It might also run into problems at one point, but I think that it is a strong foundation to start with, and that it's actually a strong point because we don't have a national chapter that has a certain political color and therefore can say certain things and do certain things in a certain way. So even though you're right, maybe it might get problematic at one point, because obviously we can't say that the youth has all the same views on all topics. I think with these certain topics, we see that there are quite similar views from all over the spectrum what needs to be done and what is important for Amsterdam.
Another question?
Yes, I was just wondering, because probably you had some visions from the start, some ideas about what you wanted to change in Amsterdam. Do you have the feeling that in the municipality you actually have enough influence? Like, so even if you would have a majority, for example, in the municipality, let's just assume that, would you have enough influence as a municipality to tackle these problems?
I think the municipality doesn't necessarily have enough influence to tackle all these problems, but I think that they have the responsibility to create the circumstances that we can actually have other people to tackle the problems that are necessary. So if we talk about housing, for example, but also about the regulations that I was talking about, I think that no, the municipality can't tackle all problems, not at all, but they are, I feel, kind of obliged to create the environment that people can actually use to tackle these kinds of problems. So that's one thing. And then another thing, would we have enough influence in the municipality per se? I think maybe not necessarily to really tackle all these problems, but I think it is really important that at least there will be one young person in the municipality that has a regular seat and that can actually, come up with a different way of looking at the problems. And that doesn't mean that one young person or two young persons or three people will be the persons that decide about these problems, but it would be good that at least there is someone that talks about it from another perspective and that is actually younger and can give this different input.
One last question.
Yeah, very nice initiative and also an interesting development because I actually know that in Utrecht the similar thing started, Student and Starters. I was wondering if you have a connection with them. I know you're operating in Amsterdam, but do you exchange your way of working or
Yeah, definitely, and obviously the cities are very different. There's actually also already for a long time a young party like this in Delft and in Groningen as well. And these two have been running for municipality elections for quite a while and are doing pretty well as well. So yeah, we're definitely talking to all these different cities. And although the problems that we're facing are very different, it is also very nice to see how other cities are doing this and tackling these problems.
I would say thank you.
Okay.